Sometime in the last 50 years, an entire civilization of practical knowledge vanished. Not ancient knowledge, not exotic knowledge, but the kind that lived in ordinary American farm households within living memory. Your grandparents knew these things. Their neighbors knew them. The county extension agent knew them. The feed store owner knew them. The young boy pulling weeds in the kitchen garden knew them. Today, most agricultural colleges do not teach a single one of them. My name is Walter, and I came to farming the hard way. Not through inheritance, but through a box of old county extension bulletins and field trial reports I pulled out of an auction sale and spent 3 winters reading cover to cover. I used what was in those pages to bring 40 acres of stripped, chemically exhausted ground back into production, and I kept a journal of every trial, every failure, and every single thing that finally worked. In this video, I will walk you through 25 skills that every American farm family knew in the 1950s, skills that have since been quietly allowed to disappear. By the end, you will have a working inventory of what was lost, what replaced it, and which of these you could recover yourself with modest effort and the right starting point. Let me pause the count a moment. What a working farm teaches you about keeping a place running does not fit inside one short video. I set the whole of it down in a manual, on the QR code on screen, or the pinned comment with the link. Have a look or carry on without it. That is my only word on it. Number 1. A farmer in rural Ohio in 1954 could walk his field at dusk, drag a heel through the topsoil, and tell you more about what that ground needed than a laboratory report would deliver 3 weeks later. He was reading color, texture, smell, and the way the soil broke apart in his fingers. A farmer who knew his ground perfectly well. Number 2. A barn wall in Kansas in 1952 might be covered in hand-drawn tables detailing wind direction, cloud type, moon phase, and planting windows cross-referenced across 30 years of family observation. Weather reading for farm timing was not superstition. It was pattern recognition built from seasons of watching what the sky did before a late frost. This skill was local. Number 3. A farm kitchen in the mid-century Midwest wasted nothing that passed through it. Surplus milk became butter, then soft cheese, then the whey pressed off the cheese went back to the garden. On-farm dairy processing was ordinary household skill in any mixed farming operation through the early 1950s. The dairy aisle replaced this profitably for someone else, and knowledge left. Number 4. A grandfather in Georgia showing his grandson how to cut seed potatoes so each piece carried at least 2 eyes and enough flesh to feed the sprout through germination guaranteed the stand. Seed stock selection and preparation meant choosing, cutting, curing, and storing seed from the previous harvest so germination stayed high and disease stayed low, without purchasing treated commercial seed every season. Number 5. 2 draft horses working a wet spring field in Indiana in 1951 made sense because steel wheels on that ground would have rutted it to mud and set the season back by a month. Matching animal power to soil and field conditions was a judgment skill. Knowing when horsepower outperformed mechanical power on small acreage was never just pure sentimentality. Number 6. A smokehouse in the Ozarks, doing the work of a freezer, kept hams hanging in the dark, cold cured and hickory smoked, safe through a summer without electricity. Meat curing and cold smoking meant understanding salt ratios, cure times, wood selection, and temperature management well enough to preserve pork without refrigeration. This skill disappeared because freezers were easier to sell to modern families. Number 7. A farmer in the Piedmont watching his corn yellow in strips and knowing without a lab visit that those strips ran across an old fence line where sod had been turned under too green. Visual crop diagnosis meant reading plant color, posture, leaf curl, and growth pattern to identify nutrient deficiencies, water stress, compaction injury, and disease pressure before they became yield loss. Number 8. A boy in Nebraska learning the smell of a root cellar that was holding right, cool, slightly earthy, dry enough, versus one that had gotten warm and would lose the turnips by January. Root cellar management meant regulating temperature through ventilation, controlling moisture through sand and sawdust packing, and rotating stores so that nothing was forgotten until it rotted. Cold storage replaced this. Number 9. A farmer in Tennessee watching where the water ran after a hard rain to mark exactly where a swale or a berm would redirect it next season into a dry corner of the field. Reading on farm water movement and planning gravity-fed drainage or retention using observation alone without engineering tools or survey equipment was standard practice in small farming operations then. Number 10. A crock of fermented grain sitting near the stove on a Wisconsin farm was just winter feeding practice. Fermenting grain, kitchen scraps, and whey together improved digestibility, stretched feed further, and kept hogs healthier through cold months without purchased additives. Probiotics for livestock are now a commercial product category. In the mid-century farm household, they were a practice costing almost absolutely nothing. Number 11. A farmer in upstate New York pulling a hand level across a new field he intended to drain, driving grade stakes, and laying tile by eye and arithmetic. Hand leveling and tile drain layout using simple tools was how subsurface drainage got installed on wet fields before professional survey and powered equipment became the assumed standard. The knowledge to install drains vanished rapidly. Number 12. A farm wife in the Shenandoah Valley boiling lye soap in a cast iron kettle in March, using wood ash from the winter stove rendered fat from the November hog kill, and a recipe adjusted by hand. Making soap from ash lye and animal fat meant understanding lye concentration, fat clarification, and batch testing for cure. Farm-made soap simply cost only labor. Number 13. A farmer in Missouri turning wheat stubble under in August with a precise understanding that 6 weeks of decomposition before frost would leave that organic matter available to next spring corn roots. Managing crop residue timing meant understanding decomposition windows, carbon to nitrogen ratios, and how to schedule tillage to maximize soil benefit from the previous season material. Neighbors passed this knowledge freely. Number 14. A girl in Arkansas watching her father tap a watermelon with 2 knuckles and set it aside, then tap another and load it straight onto the wagon without checking a calendar. Reading harvest maturity by hand and ear meant percussive testing of melons and squash, thumbnail estimation for fruit, seed rattle, and stem check for grain. Hands and ears cover ground incredibly fast. Number 15. A horse collar hanging in a Pennsylvania barn in 1953, stuffed and repaired a dozen times, fit rechecked against the horse shoulder before every heavy pull. Basic harness and tack repair meant stitching leather, setting rivets, reshaping collar pads, and fitting draft harness to the individual animal closely enough to prevent shoulder sores. Equipment maintained properly in the barn lasted decades. Number 16. A farmer in Michigan walking his apple block in February with a pruning saw on his belt, taking a few seconds per tree to make cuts that would open the canopy to light by June. Fruit tree pruning for yield and longevity meant reading scaffold structure, identifying fruiting spurs versus water sprouts, and timing cuts to avoid disease without hiring orchard management companies. Number 17. A farm boy in the Carolinas cutting a grafting notch with a pocket knife into a rootstock the size of his thumb, working fast, keeping the cambium surfaces aligned, binding with a strip of rubber. Grafting and budding fruit trees allowed farmers to propagate proven varieties onto disease-resistant rootstocks without purchasing nursery stock. Making your own orchard provided a different security level entirely. Number 18. A farmer in Oklahoma watching his neighbor field blow in a dry April wind and knowing that the neighbor had tilled too fine too early and that his own rougher, cloudy surface 3 rows over would hold. Tillage timing and surface management for wind erosion control meant reading soil moisture and structure to determine when and how coarsely to till the top layer. Number 19. A woman in rural Wisconsin keeping a ledger at the kitchen table that tracked every input, every yield, every sale, and every animal because she considered it the only honest way to know whether the operation was gaining or slowly bleeding. Hand-kept farm financial records meant double-entry input and output tracking, per acre cost accounting, and seasonal cash flow mapping properly. Number 20. A farmer in Virginia building a fence line in 1948 with hand-driven posts and a single wire stretcher. That fence is still standing today because it was driven deep, set plumb, and braced at every corner with geometry his father taught him. Corner bracing and wire fence construction meant brace geometry, post depth calibrated to soil type, wire tensioning, splicing. Number 21. A farm in Iowa where the hog pen muck went into a managed pit in October and came out onto the cornfield in April, not hauled away, not wasted, but timed and managed as the most reliable fertility source on the property. Manure management as precision fertility meant timing application to the crop calendar, managing composting temperature to reduce pathogen load carefully. Number 22. A farmer in Minnesota testing his hand-saved oat seed in a damp cloth on the kitchen windowsill in February, counting germination across 100 seeds before committing to planting, and pulling the lot if the count came in below a workable threshold. Germination testing and seed viability assessment using blotter methods allowed farmers to evaluate saved seed before spring absolutely free. Number 23. A farm in Georgia where nothing went to the burn pile that could go to the compost heap. Crop residue, kitchen scraps, wood ash, and spoiled hay layered and turned through summer until it was black and crumbling and ready to go back into the garden rows. Layered compost construction meant understanding carbon to nitrogen ratios, managing moisture, turning schedule, and temperature. Number 24. A farmer in Kentucky with a broken cultivator shank and a full week of cultivating ahead, walking to the shop, heating the shank at the forge, reshaping it on the anvil, and having it back on the toolbar before noon without waiting on a parts order. Basic blacksmithing and tool repair meant managing a forge fire, reading metal temperature by color correctly. Number 25. A farmer in Illinois standing at the end of his rows in October, looking back at a field that had taken everything the season threw at it and still produced, and feeling something that had no market value and no line on a balance sheet. Every skill on this list was ordinary once. None required genius or specialized schooling or expensive machinery. They required someone who knew the thing to stand next to someone who did not and show them season after season until the knowledge passed. Somewhere in the last 50 years, that chain quietly broke. It did not break all at once, nor did it break dramatically, but item by item, skill by skill, as each one stopped being economically necessary to know and started being something you could simply purchase instead. That is not a grand conspiracy. It is just exactly how modern agricultural markets work. But it is certainly worth knowing what was traded away, and worth deciding deliberately which pieces you want back. This knowledge represents independence, resilience, and a deep connection to the land that sustained generations before us. When we lose these practical skills, we lose a part of our heritage and our ability to be truly self-sufficient. We can still choose to reclaim them today, step by step, for our future.